Hey everybody, I've got Michelle with us. I'm really excited about this because Michelle is really a very interesting person who I think is a great example of the WordPress community as a whole. Like she's involved with organizing WordCamps. She runs an awesome podcast where she introduces and interviews exciting people in the WordPress community. She works at Give WP, a very popular WordPress plugin, and she's just super awesome all around. So hey, Michelle, thank you for being here, and would love to talk to you more about kind of the WordPress community and how you got involved and kind of your backstory.
Well, first of all, with an introduction like that, like I need you to like just record that and send it to me every morning because that would keep me going.
It's all the
Thank
truth, man.
you.
It's great.
I really, really love this community. I'll tell you, well, first of all, the joke this week is that like 3 years ago, I was telling people, oh, I've been using WordPress for like 10 years. And then a couple weeks ago, I actually looked up when my first website published, and it was 2012. So it hasn't even been 10 years yet. So it just feels like I've been part of the community forever because it's such a welcoming environment. But I built my first WordPress website in 2012. Actually, rewind, I didn't build it. I put content on it. So what had happened is my best friend and I, we had a nonprofit organization that we started here in Rochester, New York called the Rochester Massage Alliance, which later became the New York Massage Alliance and which later just kind of failed. But anyway, that's another story. But her husband is a web designer, and he built us this website. And we were like, oh, cool. And we started sending him all of the content. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute, girls. I'm going to give you a login and you have to put the content on. And so, I logged into my first WordPress website and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to kill this site. I'm going to do something. I'm going to push the wrong button. I'm going to find a way to make this thing. And he's going to be like, how can you not even, populate a website? But instead of, I kind of like logged in tentatively. Instead of being overwhelmed, I was like, oh, this is super cool. How can I not only provide content, but how can I build these? And so she was a massage therapist and worked evenings, and he worked full time, and they had 5 kids together. And I said, can you teach me how to, I understand how to buy a domain, and I understand how to work with WordPress, but I don't understand how you put WordPress on a domain, and so that I go to a website and I do that. So can you show me that part? And so he said, tell you what, you come over and make dinner for the 5 kids and me, and I will show you how to build a WordPress website. And so that's what we did. I think I still have it somewhere, just one little sheet of paper, like a little note card that had 4 things on it about salt keys, about how to download WordPress and upload WordPress. He didn't show me any like one button install or anything because he wanted me to understand how it really worked. And at the end of that night, I had domains, I had hosting, and I knew how to make it all like flow from beginning to end. And that was the start of like my love of all things WordPress. Pretty cool.
Wow. How did that scale up to you being so involved in the community and like starting up WordCamps and interviewing people and launching a podcast and just all the other stuff around that?
Well, that's an interesting story too, and that still has to do with him. So, Rob Marriage, if you're listening, thank you for everything. I'm still best friends with his wife, but I don't see him that often. But he was running the meetup here in Rochester, New York, and so he said, you should come to the meetup. You'll learn so much. Well, remember, all I had really done so far was install WordPress and knew how to provide content. So the very first meetup I ever went to, they're talking about like DigitalOcean, which is way over my head. And then they started showing how to work with CSS, and I was way over my head. And I was like, yeah, maybe meetups aren't for me. And I literally didn't go back to anything for almost 2 years. And he said, you really should start coming back to the meetups. I promise you, the first one you went to, first of all, I was the only woman in the room too. So it was like, I just felt like the fish out of water, so to speak. So I started going back and I was like, oh, this isn't all like way over my head. Plus, I had a couple years in of understanding how to use WordPress. And so, so I started going back to meetups. And then he said, well, here's the thing. So they would be like, hey, we haven't had a meetup in a while. Is everybody free next Tuesday? And I was like, okay, the organizer in me hates that. Like, we need a schedule. We need to know what we're talking about. And then a little while later, he said, I can't keep up on this. Does anybody want to take over managing the local meetup, and I'm like, oh, I'm all over that. So that was how I really got started with the community, is setting up a year of talks in advance, regulating that we would meet like the first Monday of every month at 6:30, and having some regularity and the attendance grew. And so he said, you should go to a WordCamp. So I went to WordCamp Buffalo, and I again felt like the fish out of water. And I had one friend there that I knew, and kind of followed that person around all day just so I wouldn't feel alone. And by the end of the day, I was like, this is so cool. The happiness bar and the people. And so like at the end of that camp, I like went right online. I signed up for WordCamp Toronto, and I went to Toronto all by myself, didn't know a soul in the room. And that was kind of like how the WordCamp bug bit, right? And so the next year I went to WordCamp US. It was the very first one in Philadelphia. And I sat down and talked to Andrea Middleton about making our meetup an official meetup, so that, I wasn't paying for the meetup space and things like that out on my own. And so we did that. And I just happened to mention to her, someday we'd like to have a WordCamp in Rochester. And she said, why someday? Why not do it now? And so 2016, we had the very first ever WordCamp Rochester, and we've had one every year since. And I just have a way with encouraging people to join me on big adventures.
That's awesome. Have you noticed that the WordCamps or the meetups have changed since you've been involved? Like, do you feel like there's like maybe more women involved, or is it more welcoming, or have you noticed any differences?
Yeah, for sure. Of course, not because of me, but in general, since 2015, the first WordCamp I went to, it's definitely changed a lot. The first WordCamp I went to, I remember them announcing, there's like, wow, 40% of the attendees here are women. And I remember thinking that's a really big number. But now we get 50%, right around that 50% and sometimes more mark at either WordCamps or meetups. And so it's really cool to see women, joining forces, being part of WordPress, and taking the time to invest in the community by attending things like that.
That's awesome. So if somebody was just to get into WordCamps or meetups now, what advice might you give for how to go about it so you don't feel uncomfortable or like the fish out of water or anything like that?
So the first thing I always say is look for somebody friendly and just introduce yourself. Usually, like if I see people sitting by themselves, I'm going to walk over because I'm not afraid of anything anymore. But I'm going to walk over and I'm going to introduce myself and ask if this is your first WordCamp and things like that. But if there isn't somebody who's like really pushy like me, then you have to self-advocate. So, find people. Sit down next to somebody, have lunch. Don't go off by yourself, but put yourself in situations where you're talking to people, because once you have that even a little bit of comfort, you're going to find that it's a lot easier to navigate the whole day, and then you'll be as addicted to WordCamps as I am.
Do you feel like people need to worry about maybe not knowing anything about WordPress, or maybe they're not skilled enough yet to go, or is there some kind of threshold you need to meet or anything like that?
No, I don't think at all. As a matter of fact, most of the WordCamps that I go to have, tracks for like beginner, blogger, things like that, all the way up to the development talks. The one thing I would say is, only sit in on the development talks if you're looking to kind of get an idea of what it is, because if you're not a developer and you don't know code, those can be really overwhelming. So if you decide to sit in on one of those, I'm not discouraging you at all, but just go in with your eyes open and know that there might be a lot over your head, like was what happened to me in my first meetup. Don't be discouraged.
I've done a couple of WordCamps. I've probably not nearly as many as you. I think I've spoken at maybe 10, something like that over the years.
Oh, that's cool.
And one of the things that I've noticed that seems a little bit, I think as the WordPress community grows and there's more meetups and it's kind of getting more and more popular, the tracks have really become more defined, at least at the WordCamps that I've gone to. Like I went to WordCamp Baltimore most recently, I think was before COVID and everything. And like you were saying, like the developer track, like people were talking about like managing these like, headless WordPress systems and like all kinds of just super deep tech stuff. And then there was like the beginner section, which like, hey, more like what you were just talking about. Here's how you upload, here's how you download, here's like just how you put content in, just literally beginner stuff. And then they had a third track, which was like business stuff. And that's the track that I was talking about, like how do I get more traffic to the site? Like how to do kind of achieve more of the business objectives instead of the technical ones. And so you've got so many people of all different walks of life showing up at this thing. And like, everybody seemed like, I've never encountered anyone at any WordPress ever where I would walk up and say hello and they're like, get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
it doesn't even matter. It's like, and it's people that I think when you and I were talking the other day, I was like, there's people of all walks of life. There's people that do super duper tech stuff. There's musicians. There's people that take pictures in the wilderness for like auto dealerships and stuff. It's like, it's people that I would never would never go cross my path in any other area of life. It's like this giant community, and everybody's excited to help everybody else. And it's I don't really know of too many other groups like that. Like even in like the music communities and stuff that I'm in, it's like everybody plays the guitar and that's kind of it. And so I mean, there's obviously plenty of diversity, but not nearly at the level of the WordCamps and WordPress stuff.
Yeah. I was in higher education for years and years, and I was on my school board, my local K-12 school board for 12 years. And so I attended so many different conferences in education. And, there's maybe 3 people from 25 years worth of educational conferences that I still am friends with on Facebook, like not even like talk to on a regular basis. But the WordPress community, I think even if I stopped my podcast, even if I stopped doing a lot of those things, I would still know people all over the world in WordPress just because of the friendly environment. The fact that even local camps, can sometimes draw people from outside of the area. But certainly things like WordCamp US, WordCamp, I haven't been overseas yet, but if I went to WordCamp Europe, WordCamp Asia, things like that, you're going to find that you're building relationships, friendships, working relationships, whatever it is, however you're networking, literally around the world. And that's that's super cool.
It really is. It really is. Well, what do you think about, as things are kind of evolving, especially over the last year or so, more and more people, especially in the WordPress community, I mean, you can just work anywhere you want. You can work from your house, whatever. Right. More and more people are kind of working from home in a community, like in a team, probably kind of like what you're doing with Give, WP. It's like, big team, but also I work at home, that kind of a thing. How do you feel like that kind of impacts your lifestyle, or maybe how do you keep your mental health solid and those types of things?
Well, the first thing is I don't own a suit anymore, so I haven't worn a suit in years now because I work at a WordPress. I remember the first conference, WordCamp that I went to. I dressed up nice. I didn't wear a suit, but I dressed up nice. I had a skirt, I had shoes, all that stuff. I showed up and I was like, I am way overdressed for this room. Like everybody's in t-shirts and jeans. And I was like, okay, so more of a Mark Zuckerberg vibe as far as clothing goes, less of Bill Gates, if you will. And so that's the one thing I think. I love the fact that it's just laid back. And the fact that people work remotely. I work in an office of 4 people here, but we are 4 people out of a staff of a team of 23, I think we are at Give now, that works all over the world. So, and some days there's nobody else here today. Like everybody's working from home today. I came here because it's better equipment, so I can have a better talk with you. But there are days we work from home, and certainly during the height of the pandemic last year during lockdown in this area, we were all working from home. And I found that being a single person, locked in my house basically for 12, 15, whatever weeks it was, it can be very isolating. We love what we do. We love our community, but without getting out of your house and doing things that are important to you, it can be very isolating and very overwhelming. And, dark feelings can absolutely creep in like that. And that's when you are maybe not getting dressed out of your pajamas, like changing from one pair of pajamas to the next, right? Or one pair of sweatpants to the next, as opposed to feeling like a live, breathing human being. And so there are definitely things that you can do if those kinds of feelings of isolation are hitting you. So one of the things that I did is I'm an avid photographer. And so I just got a new camera this week. I'm very excited about it. Going to go out this weekend and use it. But I couldn't go out. I couldn't go to the store. I couldn't. Plus, I'm immunocompromised. So, you weren't going to find me at Walmart, even masked up and gloved and anything else. So, but one thing I still could do is I could get in my car with my camera and drive and find places to take pictures of. So, there's a place in central New York called Montezuma Wildlife Refuge, and there's a 3-mile drive through it. and you can't go more than like 10, 15 miles an hour. It's a gravel road. But I took pictures last year of great blue heron, of red-tailed hawks and great snowy egrets, and I got some pictures of bald eagles and painted turtles and bumblebees and flowers and flora and everything that was through that area. And to be able to it takes me an hour and a half to get there, so I'm out in the sunshine driving. It takes me about 3 hours to drive through it because I stop and take a million pictures, and then an hour and a half back, and maybe I'd drive through and get something to eat because it was like a treat because I wasn't having to cook for myself, right? But just that, and then getting home and editing the photos and reliving that and sharing those photos with people, that was something that really got me through that loneliness and that isolation. That and Legos. I invested a lot of money last year in building Legos. I had never built Legos before, and I was like, I need something to do. And so I started doing things like that and different crafts and things. So if you can find a hobby that, even if it doesn't put you with other people, at least gets you out of the house and gives you another way to connect with people online or, via text or phone calls and things like that. For me, that was actually a saving grace. And it still is, because, I'm still being cautious. We're still not meeting in great big groups. I'm still not going to word camps, and I'm still attending church online and all of those things that I would normally be with people. So, having the camera, going out and doing things like that, it makes a difference for me. And I'm not saying everybody should, go out and buy a camera, whatever it is, that something that appeals to you. Kayaking, for example. I know a lot of friends that my daughter bought a kayak last year because it's a singular thing, but it gets you outside and puts you in the water and puts you near, nature and those kinds of things. So I just think having a hobby like that is something that really can help a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I did something sort of similar. I picked up the guitar again and started writing songs and stuff, and that's been a lot of fun. But you've also started a podcast, right? You got a while ago. Yeah. You started one, WP Coffee Talk, and you're interviewing people. Tell us a little bit more about your podcast.
Yeah, so the fun thing about the podcast, we're coming up on 2 years. So June 1st, it'll be 2 years that the podcast's been out. And I really started it just as a challenge to myself to see if I could figure out how to make a podcast work. I use this phrase all the time when I talk about it because it's true. I figured I would record somewhere between 4 and 12 episodes and then it would die a sad little death. And that didn't happen, but I kind of expected that I would either lose interest or that nobody would be interested in being on my podcast, right? And so that there was other podcasts that did similar things. We all interview people. And so what I decided to do is I ask every single guest the same set of questions, as you know, because you are on my podcast with the same set of questions. And I call it the Great Equalizer. So the first thing is, it's like this, right? It's just friends having conversation about things. I ask the same questions. Everybody has different answers. We can delve into them. It's not the same conversation just because it's the same questions by any means. But I call it the Great Equalizer because whether you're Matt Mullenweg and I ask you what's your biggest fail in WordPress, or you're somebody who's just built their first blog and I ask you so we all have answers to that, right? Everybody has a failure. Everybody has a success. Everybody has things that they wish they'd known sooner and things that they want to do. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think it's really awesome that I can have all these different people from different experiences, different parts of the world. I've interviewed people on 6 continents, which I think is super cool. Wow. Antarctica is still the one holdout, but they don't have great internet down there, so I'm not sure how that's going to work. But I've had people from all over the world, and I have made friendships because of people being on my podcast. And I've had invitations to different parts of the world, hey, you got to come to WordCamp India, or you have to come to WordCamp, whatever. And when you're coming, you're staying with my family and things like that because of the friendships that I've built through WordPress, through the podcast, and just the different things that I do. That's
awesome. And then you got involved with Give. So how did that happen? How did you get connected with that? And maybe even tell us what it is, and then how do you get connected? I don't know if everybody knows about the plugin.
Yeah. So GiveWP is a donations plugin for WordPress. It's the #1 donations plugin for WordPress. And, it's a suite of add-ons. The GiveWP itself is free. So if you want to raise money through your website, you can connect with PayPal, you can connect with Stripe. It's pretty robust in and of itself. But then we have a suite of plugins. We have different plans, so basic, plus, and pro plans that include different plugins with a different number of licenses that you can use. And those give you additional functionalities like recurring donations or fee recovery, where somebody can opt to cover your transaction costs, for example. And I had actually used GiveWP on a site. I every year give away a website to a nonprofit. That's my way of giving back to the community, especially when I was freelancing. And I gave away a site to a group that raises money for refugee camps in South Sudan. And so I used GiveWP, and we bought an add-on for that site to do recurring donations. And then I happened to be at WordCamp Ottawa, and GiveWP was there. Now, I had met them at WordCamp Pittsburgh the year before. And so I walked up and I said, "Oh, you probably don't remember me. I met you last year." And Jason Cadell said, "Oh, I remember you." He still says he remembers me. I still think he was lying, but that's okay. There were a lot of people. But I started to tell them, since I met you last year, I used GiveWP on this site, and I showed them the site. And they said, "Hey, could we interview you for our blog and showcase your website that you built on the blog?" And I'm like, "That'd be awesome." So the next day I sat down with them, and they interviewed me for the blog, all about Udo Cope, which was the name of the organization. And at the end, I said to him, if you're ever hiring, yours is one of the organizations that I would consider closing up my shop and going to work for. And by January, I was employed as the head of customer success at GiveWP. So there you go.
Wow. So how long has it been since that? So you said, was that this past January?
January 2018, I started.
2018,
so
okay.
It's been over 3 years already. I love it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. So I know, Ben Meredith, who I met at WordCamp Raleigh, and I've seen him a couple of times down there. In fact, the first time I went, it was kind of like what you just said. I was just kind of standing over the corner, not knowing what to do. And he's like, "Hey, come over here." And we were having dinner and everything. So he said, "Come join us." And I think I met his wife was there, and he was telling us about his family. Yeah. And I mean, he's like an instantly friendly person. So it's like, that was fun.
He is. Yeah, for sure. He's pretty awesome. He's the head of support. So if you have a support question, you'll get Ben. And I'm the head of customer success, and my team does a lot of onboarding, helping people decide if GiveWP is the right fit for them, and then helping them, guiding them through the installation process and things like that if they have questions. So yeah, we make a pretty robust team between support and success.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things that you said that really stood out to me is the concept of just giving back. And in fact, the name of the plugin is Give. And so you've got, like when you're freelancing, like I want to give back to the community and kind of give somebody a website, once a year, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And then you told me a story about people giving back to you in kind of this surprise way. And do you want to tell that story real quick? I thought that was really moving and awesome.
It is a truly amazing. I finally got to the point where I could talk about it without crying, because I'm an emotional person and it was an emotional thing. But my laptop was basically slowing down terribly, just so terribly. And, we have to provide our own laptops. Most companies, that's the case. It's not in our contract that they supply laptops. So I was, using it every day for GiveWP, of course, but it was getting older. It was 5 or 6 years old, and it was a MacBook Air, not a MacBook Pro. And so it was taking up to 7 hours just to render the video for WP Coffee Talk. And one of my colleagues at the time, Allie Nimmons, she and I actually have underrepresented in tech.com right now together. She no longer works for GiveWP. She's out doing her own thing now. But she was just like dumbfounded that I was using such a machine that would take so long to process episodes and things like that. But it also wasn't in my budget at the time to go out and just buy a new MacBook. And so, unbeknownst to me, she set up a website called getmichelleanewlaptop.com. And she, through DMs, they didn't put it on Twitter and things like that. She DM'd people who shared it with other people. And within a week, about 45 people had donated to get me a new laptop. And so what I'm using right now to talk to you today is a MacBook Pro that was a gift to me from about 45 people in the WordPress community, and I am just forever grateful. And that is just another one of the reasons that I try to pay it forward and give back as much to the community as I can, because I've been so blessed. As a matter of fact, the headphones I'm wearing were a gift from Chris Lemma, because I didn't get Wix headphones, and he thought I should have new good headphones. And so I am just absolutely constantly blessed by this community.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. I love that. It's like, where else do you find, especially in the professional world, where else do you find that happening? It's just really cool.
I don't think you do.
Yeah, I can't think of any other place. Everything is also like competitive or something. I'm not even sure what the right word is. But like, how many times have you gone to a WordCamp where you see two people or two businesses that kind of do the same thing that might be competitors, but they're giving each other tips and helping each other? In fact, I think you were even telling me about that last time we talked.
Yeah, going out to dinner together afterwards and that kind of thing. Absolutely. It's really cool. I think it's, at the end of the day, yeah, there's, hosting companies, and there's lots of hosting companies, and half of the tables at a WordCamp are hosting companies. But at the end of the day, we're all sitting down having dinner together at the after party and things like that, because we're not competing people to people. It's just business, and we all enjoy what we do with within our companies, and we all enjoy what we do within the space, for sure.
That's awesome. So let's see if we can wrap this up so that people can keep in touch with you and find out where to get a hold of your content and all the different things, because you're involved in so many different things. You're doing WordCamps and meetups and podcasts and Give and all of these different things. Yeah. Where can people find you and get in touch with you and keep following all the stuff that you're doing?
Sure. Well, if I can throw a couple links out there. The first one is, if you're looking for a job in WordPress, you can go to wpcareerpages.com. That is a site I built. That's one of my gifts to the community. And every Wednesday, I tweet out job opportunities. So people who are looking specifically for work in WordPress can follow me on Twitter at Michelle Ames, or they can go to WP Career Pages for that. And then, as I mentioned, Allie Nimmons and I have underrepresentedintech.com. And that's a way for people who are underrepresented groups, whether you're, Black, Indigenous, people of color, so you're part of the BIPOC community, LGBTQ community, you are part of the disabled community, whatever makes you somebody who would be underrepresented, you can be in that database, and anybody else can search that database. So if you have a podcast and you want to have better diversity and better perspectives and experiences, you can go to underrepresentedintech.com for that. GiveWP is givewp.com. And then my podcast is wpcoffeetalk.com. But you can find links to everything at worksbymichelle.com. That's where I keep kind of everything. It needs a little work, so the site's actually under construction a little bit right now, but all the links are still there, so that you can find any way to be in touch with me that you want.
That's awesome. So I'll take all those things that you just said, and I'll put them in the show notes, right, so that people can click on the links and stuff below this video. So we'll make sure that that's all squared away too. But I mean, you're involved in I don't know anyone else involved in so many things as you. I mean, you've got your hand in all kinds of things, but it does seem to have a really cool common theme, which is helping people, building community and helping people. It's like all the things that you just mentioned, all the way from your job down to your podcast. It's like everything is like, what can I do to serve, help, love other people so that everybody is winning? And I think that's just fantastic.
Well, it turned out that the key to my personal happiness was in helping other people be successful and happy themselves. And that's what actually just makes me smile on a day-to-day basis. And the one link I did forget is bigorangeheart.org. So Big Orange Heart is, we talked about the isolation and things earlier. Big Orange Heart is a charity started as WP and Up within WordPress, and it is a charity to help remove the isolation that remote workers feel for better mental well-being. So bigorangeheart.org. I am a volunteer there as well.
That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to take all that stuff, put links down below this video, and if you're watching this, click on all these things and go see what Michelle is up to. Follow her podcast, follow her on Twitter, check out these websites. You're going to get awesome information and content, and you'll be kind of contributing and be part of the WordPress community. And that'll be a huge blessing for everybody.
For sure. Thanks
so
so much
awesome, Michelle. Thanks so much.
It's been awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so huge high five to you. Woohoo! Awesome. Well, all right. Well, I'll go ahead and kind of end it there. I'm going to put all these links in there, and definitely a huge encouragement. Click this stuff and follow Michelle. She's awesome, and it'll be a blessing to you for it. So, all right, guys.
Thanks, Lee.
Talk to you next week.